Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching in YouTube and you see a little button down below and you want to join the conversation, you click on that link and you'll end up in Zoom. Once you end up in Zoom, you click on the link and you'll end up in Mukana, and that's where you can ask questions and be part of the conversation. If you think you can actually contribute to the conversation, we would love to have you. This is a constantly evolving and changing expert panel that changes every day a little bit, and we have different people join us and become part of that conversation. And this is how we answer these questions. And so we'd love to have you. If you have some experience and you'd like to be part of that conversation, please join us. You just need to be here early by 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We open the doors at 6. If you want to ask general questions, if you're working on something, or if you I will say that the real working on something is at 5. You'll see in the email from Okana, you'll see a pre-show. That's where we really just there's no rush and we just kind of nug through things. At 6 o'clock though, if you want to come and be part of the general conversation and check out your kit, you're more than welcome to. And then again, we start at 6:40, and then at 7 o'clock, we have general questions. Now, today, we are, it's just two hours of Q&A, so definitely ask lots of questions. Tomorrow is we're going to talk about comms a little bit. We think it's important. We have some requests to talk about that. Jonas Dautel, our own Jonas Dautel, he's in our group, is going to talk about he's got a HyperDeck simulation on a Raspberry Pi. So we're pretty excited about him walking us through how that works. And then Thursday we have special guests. I can't say today, but hopefully I'll be able to put it into the notes tomorrow. But we have some special guests lined up right now for Thursday. And so those are some of the stuff that is that's coming up in the next little bit of time. One thing that I thought is Grant still here? Did we lose Grant? Oh, he was here. Then he was gone.
Yeah, he slipped out.
No, and Grant slipped out. I wanted to pull Grant back in because he mentioned something in the pre-show that I just found profound, was that he was talking to somebody else and he was describing it and really was talking about the fact that you just can't have this conversation anywhere else. Like you couldn't have 20 people in a normal conversation talking about something together in a physical world. Like we'd be too far apart from each other. We'd be like a giant Arthur style round table yelling at each other, eating mutton. Anyway, so but the point is that I just don't think that this is a very unique conversation that I haven't seen anywhere else. And so anyway, I just want to thank everyone for being part of this kind of crazy experiment. It's a very interesting puzzle. Anyway, Bill, let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
Absolutely. And the first one is kind of on topic for what you were just talking about. James in Dublin, Ireland says, great conversation yesterday on the idiosyncrasies of pinning and spotlighting with host, co-host, and permissions in the current version of Zoom. Could you recap the findings for everyone who didn't catch it yesterday?
You want to talk to it, Nikki?
So what we figured out yesterday is that it's not just the host that could control what is sent out to attendees and also to the stream. It is also co-host. So say at the moment I am the host, and for example, if Alex switches right now, at the moment it's at gallery view, and if maybe Alex switches to speaker view, we should see that switch as well. And there we see it that it switched to active speaker view without me doing anything.
So it appears that co-hosts are now affecting the view of everyone instead of just the host, which is not a desirable experience. And it appears that it happened in the last couple versions. Something went in. We do think it's great that the host wouldn't have to do it, but we just have to define one person. Otherwise, everybody changing their views all the time affects everybody who's watching in a webinar, which is kind of disastrous. Bill,
James,
like this is the biggest bug in Zoom that I've seen in 6 months. Like it's just devastating. Like it's a devastating problem. Anybody running a webinar is going to have a problem with this. Bill.
And to James's point, if we weren't in this format where we could see and hear each other in virtual real time, we wouldn't have picked up on it, because it wasn't, but for the fact that I had changed a gallery view, it affected Mickey said it at the moment I did it, which was the link to wait a second, what I changed here, not being the host, changed it for everyone, that allowed us to determine what was going on.
Yeah. Go ahead, Courtney, and then Doug, and then Stuart.
Oh, and it seemed like YouTube was stuck in gallery view, but just finally caught up there. But for the longest time, there was stuck in gallery view. But I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
Well, I think that was it. A lot of us who have functions on the show, I know I keep going back to gallery view all the time, and I'm typically a co-host. So I was pushing everybody on YouTube back to gallery view, completely not knowing I was doing that.
I mean, for Bill and I, we are constantly going back to gallery view. So every time Mickey tries to highlight somebody, we immediately go back to gallery view because we have to see people's hands. And so we're constantly trying to go back to that. And so people were complaining that they were only seeing gallery view. It's not Mickey cutting only gallery view. It was that Bill and I were constantly defeating it because we didn't know, and we need to see gallery all the time, And so it's a fascinating. Anyway, there's not a fix. I mean, we're hoping that there'll be a fix. The fix is you just have to be super conscious that co-hosts have this impact. If they're not co-hosts, then it doesn't appear to affect. In fact, to that point, Mickey, you should probably make sure. I think I'm not a co-host now, and you want to make sure that anybody who needs to, like Bill and I, should not be co-hosts.
Right, because we don't want to affect that.
Yeah. Doug, and then Stuart.
Well, you answered my question. Is like, what's the Band-Aid for it right now? Is either not have co-hosts or make sure whoever is a co-host is not going back to gallery view, right?
Yeah.
The bottom line is the thing is that co-hosts, until this is fixed, co-hosts should never touch their view unless they're editing, the show. They should never they should never change their view. And if they want to change their view, they should not be co-hosts. I think that's the fix right now. Go ahead, Stuart.
This matches what I mentioned a few weeks ago when I noticed some odd behavior. That is exactly what it was doing. So I'm glad that we've narrowed down to what was causing it, because it was a pain.
Yep. Go ahead, Mickey.
And yeah, thanks for bringing that up back then, Stuart. I noticed, because I know Alex looks towards his right side when he switches back to gallery after I spotlight someone. Then I just noticed, like, whenever Alex looks there, it switches back to gallery for the stream. Right. So in the past, when I first started cutting office hours, I would always keep another laptop here just watching the attendee view. And I got confident with it. And I got lazy setting up another computer every night. Right. But now I've set that up so that I can keep an eye on what's going on. And I just, during the times that it does switch to a view that I'm not intending to show everyone, then I just quickly go back to do a quick back and forth on my switching, and that refreshes the view for everyone else.
Go ahead, Jeff Francis.
Does the co-host have the ability to switch what the attendees see, that menu setting, or is that still just the host?
The co-hosts have that control as well.
That's okay. In the last couple.
Can you show that, Mickey, for people who haven't seen that?
I don't have a way to show that at the moment, but if you're a co-host in a webinar, it will be in the view button that's in the upper right corner of your main Zoom window. And then it says there attendee view, and people hosts and co-hosts. Okay.
And go ahead, Hasmukh, real quick, and then we're going to move on to the next one. And Mickey, can we turn off the app? Who has the iPad attendee view? I just don't want to have it in the.
That's Guy.
Guy, if we can turn that on. It's just confusing to see it side. It's good when we're talking about it, but it's confusing to see it when we're watching it. Go ahead, Hasmukh.
Spotlight shows that for everyone in a meeting, one cannot force a grid view on everyone. Is that correct?
Well, it's what we're talking about is what the attendees see in a webinar. So the panelists all see whatever they have it set to. But what we're noticing is that if you do a call and you switch to speaker view or grid view as a co-host, all co-hosts are affecting. And what Zoom really needs is another class of user called editor that is halfway between a co-host and a host or whatever, that doesn't have any of the benefits of being a co-host other than what they do. And then if I was doing that, I would give the editor an entirely different view. Like I would change how it all occurs. And one of the things, looking at what Andy was asking about, I think yesterday or the day before, or yesterday, I'm really strongly thinking that we're going to do something where either the editor view or all the panelists start going into Zoom OSC, because we can add so much more data, to the process. Go ahead, Leo.
So I'm going to take it slightly different direction, but not. My view is that I've always thought that Zoom itself is not a production tool for producing out. I agree with it as a production tool as a CDN, but producing out an event, I think Zoom is particularly weak in compared to some other products, because you can't do lower thirds. You can't pin people in exactly where you want them. You can't lay people out exactly where you are. And this is just another example of it, where you think you're controlling the output and you're not controlling the output, because Zoom is just working as a meeting.
I agree. And I mean, I don't use it that way. I have everybody, we do, even if you're in Zoom, we do what we call produced Zooms, where everybody's in a point-to-point in rooms, and then we feed that program back into the webinar, or even back into the meeting. So we're not the only place one of the only places that we do this is actually this meeting. This meeting, we still rely on Zoom to do that. And that's partially because we're doing it every day for hours and we have no budget. And we're not the only ones. So the reason that I think it's important for us to figure out how to do it with the current tools is mostly because we do have clients that need to produce things without a huge budget or without a whatever. And so to your point, for someone who's going to do something that is going to be in front of thousands of people, or it's a production and they're really, basing it on it, we figured out how to do this pretty well with, inside of the current tools. And I think that Zoom has to keep on progressing. I do agree with you that, is it a high-end production tool? No, we definitely supersize it. We, but it's like taking a Honda Accord and putting, all kinds of stuff on it to make it go faster. Like we could. You're right that we could just buy an F1, or we could buy an Indy car, but we could we could go pretty far turning something into a, supersizing an off the shelf car. So I think that's what a lot of us do, but we do have to figure out how people can do their average webinars with the current tools as they're built. And there's kind of that step where there's, how do you use Zoom to do what it does inside of its own platform? Then how do you use Zoom OSC to supersize that? Then how do you use hardware to supersize that? Then how do you put it in the cloud? There's like 4 steps of, there's like, 4 steps, and some of them are intermingled. Like, for instance, what I'm envisioning for where we're going with this is a mixture of the cloud and Zoom OSC and our hardware, I think is the biggest solution, where you can, where we can do the most. And so it's just a matter of, I don't think it's any one of those things, but Zoom has to figure out how to make it a better experience for the average person to do what they need to do. Courtney?
And if you're listening Zoom and you take Alex's advice and create the editor class, I would give that person also the ability to grant screen share permissions, because that might be another necessary thing for the editor to
without making them co-hosts.
Exactly.
Yes, please. Anyway. All right, next question.
Moving on. The next one comes from James in Dublin, Ireland. What is a good way to monitor internet bandwidth that's been used both up and down during a live stream?
Good, John.
You need to put a tap in at the network gateway, so that, like in my home, I've got my router here. It shows me, what I'm using for my internet WAN. And then you just need to monitor what's going up and what's going down. You can see I got a blue spike in there. It's going to vary the tools that you use. There's a lot of them out there. Some of the others can probably talk to the tools that they've used. I'm not a networking guy, but you just need to put it. I used the one on my router because it's built in and it's there.
Yeah, go ahead, Lucas, and then Jason.
Yeah, I just wanted to say kind of the same thing. For me, that would be pfSense, which is an open source firewall, which works great and has a quite good monitor already built in, and you can load some other packages for network inspection and things like that. So the advantage of that is, and you can also see which traffic actually goes to your live stream and which is perhaps other things going out or in that could interrupt, and you can shut it down that way. So that could be one thing to do.
Go ahead, Jason.
Any router that has DPI or deep packet inspection is automatically doing this. It is absolutely necessary. In order to inspect packets, you have to be counting bits, and add a per second to that, and you're good to go. Ubiquiti does a great job. On the consumer side, Eero is a relatively accurate speed test. It's not real time. You need to run it explicitly, and you shouldn't be doing that while you're doing a live stream. But yeah, anything that does DPI will do the job.
On our end, we use, I think I haven't done it with Ubiquiti, but I know that they can. We use, of course, the Meraki that I've talked about in the past, where we have graphs of everything all the time. And it really helps, like when we do fallover tests, we can actually see the fallover test from one encoder to the other. We can see it crisscross, and we can, that tells us a lot about what we're doing. We can see the health. And one of the things we do immediately, no matter what you're using to watch it, is as soon as we get to a location or for a big event, we start running our encoders and we start watching the graphs. We're testing the network. Like the encoders are just stress testing the network. We're pushing out 20, 30 megs a second and just watching it over time. We'll come back and look at that graph over the day and see, did we have any dropouts? Like we don't have to even watch the video the whole time. We just want to look at that graph and know, oh, we're having multiple dropouts or odd spikes or other things that we're not expecting. And those are useful. You do want to be able to see both outgoing and incoming as separate things if you can, because if you're watching your own video, you're watching HLS typically. And when you do that, you're getting surges because it's downloading a whole bunch of packets and then waiting and then downloading. So you'll see this kind of heartbeat of HLS coming in. If it takes your stats and merges them together, it's hard to tell what else is going on. Next question.
Actually, the next highest rated one from everyone's votes is another James in Dublin question. And he says, specifically for Jonas Dautel, you mentioned using Mumble yesterday as a back channel for communications. Could you tell us more about how you set that up and use it? So question for Jonas.
Go ahead, Jonas.
So Mumble is basically a voice over IP client like TeamSpeak or Discord. And why I use it over Discord is you can host it local. So we have, you can either host it on a Windows PC or a Raspberry Pi, and then have everybody connect into it. For example, even mobile phones, and then we have like a cheap Wi-Fi router and everyone talks over Mumble. And a really cool feature is that it has a text channel and it reads out the texts that are coming in, so I don't have to read it.
Putting me out of work.
I do think that that's something that Unity could add to what they're doing is text, because there's a lot of times we're in productions where we can't talk, and being able to have text on top of that would be useful. So Mumble, and it's open source. It doesn't cost anything to use.
Yes, it's open source, and they are working on listening into multiple channels, which would be pretty cool. And it comes from game streaming with positional audio, but now it's used in production a lot.
Go ahead, Lucas.
And the smallest package would be a Raspberry Pi, which also would act as the Wi-Fi access point, which I wouldn't recommend, but it would be the smallest possible package. So you just plug in your Raspberry, it spans up the Wi-Fi, and everyone connects over that. So that would be the smallest version.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Mickey.
And yeah, just looking at their website, looks like they offer what we call this, a cloud server, a hosted Mumble server that you can rent out, subscribe to, similar to Unity, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, having that local one is important also in bandwidth constrained locations. So yeah, I mean, we've definitely needed those in places like Africa, where we have tons of local network, but getting out in and out of the world is complicated. Next question.
Comes from Jeff Francis, who is here on the panel. And Jeff wants to know from Columbia, South Carolina, could I use a Zoom room on a Mac to pull ISO feeds from a meeting? And he wants to know if he needs an iPad as a controller.
3 ISO feeds, I think, is the specific question there. Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I think one of them might be dirty. Here's what the controller looks like, just to show you. So if I pin Jeff, so if I had 3 displays, you would see a third one here. I got Alex pinned on 1. Now I'm going to pin Jeff on 2. And then if I show you what that output looks like, so here's Jeff, and I'm going to cut to him now. And you're going to see that thing in the top left is what will be there, and the bottom left and the bottom right. Me talking, that's the issue that our friend Greg Gibson has found, is that he can't get rid of this on one of the displays. So effectively, he's getting 2. I want to confirm that with, that's on a PC. So I want to confirm that with Fenwick, because he's saying that he hooked up his Atem ISO and got 3. But yeah, so here's what the second one would look like. If we go to Alex, we can do, yeah, same thing. We're getting, you just need to crop in, so you're getting 105% or so to get rid of that garbage. That's,
and you may have to do more to get rid of that top garbage. It might be like 110 to get that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yep. And so that's, sometimes you might need to ask the talent to, frame up a little bit different to be able to achieve that crop, so it's not cutting into their headspace.
And when we do the point to points with the room, all we get is the connection in the lower left. That little connection symbol is the only one we get. So we don't see anything else when we only have one.
You're not seeing the record or the shield?
Nope.
I wonder how you got rid of that.
We don't have multiple tenants. I don't know why, but we don't on a point to point connection. Yeah, that's why you can't add more people to it. But on a point to point connection, you only see in that lower piece, you only see that little connection thing. So otherwise it's clean aperture, which is why I complain about that little connection thing, because I think that the hilarious part of this is that it's the one tool that we probably don't need. Like, it's completely inaccurate. It is the most useless piece of graphic that's in Zoom. And it's the only one left.
We only knew somebody at Zoom that could help clean this up.
somebody. All I can say is that whoever manages that symbol, it's got a lot of juice at Zoom, because they got that thing, and no matter what we get rid of, we can't get rid of that one thing. I'm like, who is that person?
That's a pad of post-it notes I have. I just pull it off each day.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, next question.
Printed. Talak Lopez Waterman, our friend from New York, says, "What got to have accessories do you have for your 6K Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera?"
I use a cage, small rig cage. I don't buy the cameras without the cage. Like, it protects the camera from falling, and it also is a rig. My camera is in front of me. I can't pick it up and show it to you, but it protects it, but it gives me 1/4 20s and 3/8 mounts all over it. And then it becomes kind of an erector set. Then you start adding things. Tilta makes one as well. I use a small rig one because it's cheaper and I don't see any difference. so anyway, that's exactly why we do that. T5 drive. There's a T5 attachment to the cage, and that small rig makes, and then you put the T5 drive in, and that it's so easy. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, +1 on the small rig. I don't buy any camera without a cage, straight away, because if I don't buy the cage immediately, I know I'm going to get annoyed and order, like, overnight from B&H all sorts of little things to try to connect it and to get into the hot shoe. And no, you just buy the cage. If you can't afford the cage, you can't afford the camera. It's that simple.
And they make a version that is compatible with the battery pack that you can put underneath the camera, but the battery pack I think is too bulky, so I don't use it. I use external power. Anyway, go ahead, Roscoe, and then Stuart, and then Charles.
Yeah, we bought the half cage because we have gals who it's hard to get that hand around that cage sometimes for the ergonomics of the controls. A battery, I saw someone already posted in a battery. You got to have an external battery. These things will just eat up the E20, E6s or whatever, like crazy. And a handle. I think a handle, when you got to move that thing around, I think having that handle on top, which it's critical.
Yeah, go ahead. Stuart, then Charles, then Bill, then Mickey.
Another +1 for the small rig stuff. I use it on a different brand of camera. But could I also point out that small rig also has a little adapter for mounting your T5 Samsung drive, and it's fantastic in the way that it clamps down not only on the drive, but a separate clamp on the cable so that it doesn't come through. And if anyone's looking at the BMD stuff and isn't getting the BMD viewfinder for other cameras, I can recommend the Fotka viewfinder that I was using a week and a half ago. The image was fabulous.
And who's next? Charles?
Yeah, so I needed to build out mine for some of the shoots that I did. So it ended up looking more like this at the end.
Right.
And some of the stuff that I needed to put was a way to have 3 monitors coming out of the camera. All right, so Wooden Cameras sell something called a C box, and it's an HDI in, and it has SDI out. So I connected one monitor for the client, one for the false color, one for the focus puller, and it worked out great. Now, the other thing that I did buy was because of the battery, and I couldn't plug it in at the time that we had it, was, let me see here, was something called a shark fin from Core Batteries, and it lets you attach 2 batteries. Right, so I had 2 of the Core HyperCore batteries, and those lasted me straight shooting 5 hours straight, no problems at all, and I still had like 30% left. So for more of a production build of a Pocket 6, these are the things that I had to get. So you can see some of the things that we had to attach to this thing, you know, rails. And it was just because we had 3 to 4 people coming at the camera, trying to tweak their own thing so that the shots could be correct. So, yeah.
That's great. That's taking it all the way to 11 pretty quickly there. Go ahead, Bill, and then Nikki.
Well, I was going to say one that I know Mickey's going to say, so I'm going to hold off on that. The other thing is whenever I get anything that I'm going to take out in the field, there's a company called Tether Tools that makes a lot of little strain relief things for the many things connected to a rig like this. So I typically go to Tether Tools first when I buy a new rig if I'm going to take it out in the field and buy some of their strain relief solutions. It keeps somebody from kicking a cable, your HDMI cable or something, and knocking it out of the camera. I find that really useful.
You should never have anything plugged into your camera that isn't tethered to something, like to whether it's Tether Tools or Velcro or tape or whatever. Never let there be a direct connection into your camera that isn't tethered to something, so that if someone pulls at it, it's not pulling at the camera, because fixing the camera is either not possible or really expensive. So you always want to tie it to something. That's something we spend a lot of time thinking about. By the way, from batteries, the one that I travel with a lot when I can't take a big rig is a Juice Box. Juice Box makes one for the 4K and 6K. It has a little mount that you can get for it that you can just attach to your tripod, and it'll run for a couple hours. And Juice Box makes these, and what's nice about the one that I get, it's pretty consumer. I don't get a lot of questions in the airport about it. It just looks like a regular battery. It does come with the connector that goes into the 6K, and it also has USB, so you can plug other things. You can just charge other things with it. So it's just kind of an all-purpose battery that I keep in my backpack. It's right out of arm's reach, but you can find it on Amazon. It's like $130 or whatever, and it's been great. And it's got a little digital thing on the front that tells me where I'm at from a power perspective as well. I usually have like 6 of the little E6s and that on most of my travel, unless I'm going into a big production, and then I have something that looks closer to what Charles does. Mickey?
Yeah, I was originally going to mention the need for an external battery, because the Canon batteries are just for hot swapping essentially.
Yeah, 15 minutes. Like the reason I keep one in is so that I can swap a battery, because the advantage of what Charles has is that when you have 2 batteries, you just keep on rolling them, right? You put one in, you pull the other one out, you can run forever. By constantly charging them. The reason I keep a battery in the camera is when I'm traveling, I have this little battery, is that I can pull that one out and put another one in, and I'm still running. Go ahead, Mickey.
And yeah, like if you do end up like using an Atem Bauer mount or a V mount battery system, get the battery plate that has multiple outputs, P tap, D tap, and what's the other one that's popular? Fisher, two pin power, because you're gonna want to power other stuff off of that battery pack, and also for more traditional shooting situations, you're gonna want an EVF and or an LCD monitor, because for traditional shooting, like over the shoulder rigs, and even like on a tripod, the LCD on the pocket is a courtesy. Like you don't want to have to lean down just to be able to see the viewfinder clearly. So you're going to want an EVF.
Yep. Go ahead, Roscoe, and then Guy, and then back
Real
to Bill.
quick, nobody mentioned Atem Mini Pro or Atem Mini Pro ISO is to me almost a dongle you need with that camera.
Yeah, it really does. It does make it a lot better. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, we're expensive friends, right? So
yep.
Here's 10 G's. This is the 20-120 on the pocket. With the battery DTAP, you can get a cable that will allow you to have the servo zoom. So now you've got smooth zooms in and out, and you got a nice big rotation on your focus. And yeah, that's a do close PL adapter that lets you go from EF to PL. So there's the big bad boy.
That's sweet.
Are you able to, through that adapter, are you able to control focus?
It's a dumb adapter.
Dumb adapter. Okay. Yep. Go ahead, Bill.
So Mickey, you missed it. The audio tap for XLR into the camera. I would expect any audio person to want to adapt.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Balance line audio.
I was thinking.
He's like, I got cut off. I didn't forget it. I just got cut off.
Yeah. There are two audio inputs on the pocket. One is a balanced TA3 connector, which is the opposite of what you would typically find of an equipment. Because typically on hardware itself, you would find a male TA3, but for some reason, Blackmagic used a female TA3 on the camera body.
Yeah, and because of that, you can't find these anywhere. Like you can't just go somewhere and buy them. I have like 3 of them because I'm constantly paranoid that I'm gonna end up somewhere without that adapter, because you can't just go to like any store and get them because it's not.
Luckily,
standard.
though, I have like half a dozen left over from the Red One days, which also used the inverse. So at least I'm using those now. And the other audio input, just so everyone knows, is an unbalanced stereo mini jack input, which can take both mic level and consumer line level.
Yep. And we almost always run at least a channel of audio from our audio stuff into the camera, just because then we just have a reference point, to work with. So definitely worth putting audio into the camera. But it's also worth having at least one mic open for one channel, because then you're getting true sync. It helps a lot of times if people are arguing about what's in sync or what's not. The camera mic and the video will almost always be in perfect sync. And so you can cross check what you're doing with audio if you have a camera mic on. Go ahead, Mickey.
And yeah, the Blackmagic Pocket cameras can record 2 tracks built in, and it could be any combination of the 2 analog audio inputs and also your built-in inputs. And also one thing one should know is that the mini jack input could also act as an LTC timecode input. So if you have a timecode generator, you can feed that in there and it will jam.
That's great. Next question.
Comes from Grant, who has abandoned us to get ready for the night show, I think, later on. And he asks from Adelaide, I need to convert about 15 inputs from HDMI to SDI going into an old Atem switcher with no scaled inputs. My tendency is to put a decimator, MDHX, on every output for future proofing, but any other ideas?
So the problem with the decimator is that it does add latency. So that no matter what you do to it, you're going to lose a frame or two. And so you always, and it's also expensive to put a decimator on each one of these. But if you, the Blackmagic HDMI to SDIs are pretty inexpensive, and you can reuse them because the new ones are bidirectional. So you can actually have, you can control the cameras with them. So and I think they're like $50. So for the price of one decimator, you can buy 6 of those. If you don't have to do any kind of frame conversion. Go ahead, Jason.
I actually have a rack mount where I line those up. You can get racks, there's what, like a 3 RU rack that lines up the larger ones. But if you look carefully on B&H, you can find the smaller rack that will actually, it's a 1 RU, and you can line up the tiny ones. And those, that's like, I've got one.
It's like 12 of them. Is that right? 12 or it's
at least something? 12. At least 12. And it's a very inexpensive, as custom RU adapters go, it's very inexpensive.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
He didn't say what he's going to be using those HDMI inputs with, and you'll note he's going to an ATEM switcher, which was very picky about input. The ones that don't have the scalers, the ATEM HD.
He said an old ATEM switcher, so that'll
be. So I would use. You may have to do frame rate conversion on every input if you're going to be going in with laptops and things like that. So I would use an MDHX. Because you're going to sacrifice a frame of sync, a frame or 2 of sync, but you got to have a scaler on each input because you don't know what's going to be coming in. And if a lot of those old the multi-input and multi-output Blackmagic converters do not frame rate convert, so whatever goes in comes out. So you're not going to end up with an output on the SDI unless you frame rate convert.
Jason.
Yeah, and one more thought on the latency. If you get the larger of the 2 adapters, almost all of them, the multi-ins will have a reference. So that way, if you are going to lose something, at least you can gen lock it. So 8, 10, 12 doesn't matter. They're all going to be line for line accurate, to each other. So the most you're going to lose is just a tiny little bit.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I'm wondering, like, say, if Grant is, I assume he might be getting feeds from multiple laptops, I guess, for ISOs. Would it make sense to get over the frame rate issue to set your switcher into whatever frame rate the computers are sending out? And if he has to do the conversion, do it at the end of at the output of the switcher, so that he's just doing one conversion at the very end.
The challenge is you get different things that just are, some of them are a little bit different. Now, I will say that if you're going to get 15 decimators, you're still talking about $4,500. At some point, the old switcher ceases to make sense, where you just get a newer switcher and spend less on getting the stuff in to make sure. And again, I mean, if you have to use an older switcher right now, I think it makes sense. I feel like Blackmagic, I mean, they're going to talk about something on Wednesday, but I feel like we're going to have to see some kind of ATEM rev this year. So I would try to hold out for a little while, to see if you can make it work. Next question.
Comes to us, and this is a fascinating question from Fred Eric Eckert of Bad Herrenalb, I believe, Germany. It's the multi-question. He's got 4 parts to this. Topic from yesterday, remote guest live stream, that's one. Number 2, vMix, ecamm, mimoLive, or webRTC based. Zoom uses HLS. What about SRT and services like Revit.stream? 3 is what protocol will survive in the future, and 4 is a point-to-point solution. Has anybody worked with Blackmagic Design Stream Bridge?
Fred, we're going to kick you back. We're going to kick you back. It's too many things. You got to ask them one at a time, and then let everyone vote on them to, rather than there's not a way for us to handle an omnibus question. Like, it's just like, it's too many questions. It's too many things. It's too many notes. So we can try to answer them really quickly, but we recommend one focused question at a time. Go ahead. Because there were 5 votes, we'll talk about it for about a minute. Go ahead, Lucas.
Yeah, I thought of interpreted as if he wanted to know what to use for remote guest live streams. So when bringing remote guests in, so I would answer to that. I mean, the Alex answer is perhaps Zoom and then one-on-one connections, and my answer perhaps would be OBS Ninja, which would be WebRTC based. And then you can do whatever you want with it. You can, for instance, use Casper CG and pipe it out of a Decklink card or something like that. So that would be one possibility. Depends on where you want to go with it.
Good, Stuart.
I'm just going to deal with which protocol will survive the future. The answer is none of them, because this stuff evolves very rapidly, and what we're using today, in 5 years' time, we'll be using something completely different.
Jeffrey?
I'll answer the StreamBridge question, and that is, it's not really meant for live stream. It's more meant for recording. But if you decide to use it in live stream, you're going to have some sort of delay that you're going to have to deal with.
Go ahead, Leo.
I'll answer as Mickey. It depends. And I would say that the answer with it is what you're trying to actually achieve at the moment. I would add into their StreamYard, because if you're talking about WebRTC and you're trying about different people in different locations, it's very easy to use that in that environment.
Can you record ISOs from StreamYard?
According to the town hall this morning, it's almost nearly there. So they're doing their audio ISOs is due to drop any minute now, and the video ISOs are coming really quickly. That said, you're recording at 1080p. So if you put 4 people up on a screen and just record it straight there, it's not bad. It's not perfect, but it's not bad in comparison to what you're going to get out of other things. But the default is always what can you actually get through to somebody, and that's where Zoom just outwins on a lot of occasions.
Yep. Guy.
Yeah, today's a good example of why this solution that I can talk about is killer, because one of our attendees is getting rolling blackouts today in Dallas due to the freezing weather, and the show is going to go on. Why? Because he has 4 computers in the cloud, 1 vMix cutting machine, 3 Zoom pinning machines, and DIing, and the show will go on. So that would be my solution: is Zoom in the cloud, 4 instances.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Zoom, for low latency, cost effectiveness, Zoom is the best in my opinion. Everything else adds latency to it, or instability, or doesn't solve everything. Of course, there are solutions once you say I just want to make sure we're not saying that at any budget we would use Zoom. At any budget we would use the switch. One step up is LTN, the next step up is the switch, which we've done a lot of. Now that's at 25 milliseconds or 50 milliseconds of delay at up to 4K, uncompressed. I don't want people to watch and think, well, that's the only solution. Is Zoom the best we can do? The Zoom is the best we can do at a budget. But when you have real budget, like big budgets, there's a lot of other hardware solutions that can be deployed that are lower latency and higher quality. Next question.
Comes to us from Ray Franklin in Mount Dora, Florida, with 3 PCs and a 48-volt mic from a 4-channel Behringer mixer. What is the preferred routing for all audio via HDMI or speaker out of each PC as a mixer input? When should the mixer USB be used? Thanks.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I would probably try to avoid using the speaker out directly from the computer's motherboard, just because a lot of motherboards are noisy, electrically noisy. So I would prefer to get individual audio interfaces that have balanced outputs and feed that into the mixer. When should the USB connection be used? I guess for me, my thinking would probably be like, if these are all the same kind of sources, like if all 3 computers are participants in a meeting, I would try to keep them the same in terms of their paths, or as similar as possible. So I wouldn't make one more special by putting in a digital connection as opposed to an analog one, unless maybe there's one that's maybe your primarily play out machine, then maybe that can be a little different. But I want consistency most of the time.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So we don't know exactly what he's trying to do with this setup, so we need a lot more information. But with only a 4-channel mixer, he's not going to be able to take stereo out of those PCs. That's part of the problem. So he's maybe getting mono voice out of the 3 PCs. And if he's at a 4-channel Behringer level, then probably the headphone output of each PC running into there is going to be fine. He can't use the USB with 3 of them. He can only use it with 1 of them if he needs feed back into that mixer. And if he goes HDMI, he's going to need to strip the audio out of that. So again, he's adding more cost than the Behringer mixer is on top of that. But it's kind of hard to know. But I would start simple if he's got just a Behringer mixer and come out of the headphone outputs. but he's going to need to be very careful that he deals with an unbalanced stereo TRS 3.5 millimeter and probably into a balanced mono. So he's going to want to have a split cable. So it goes to TS left and right individual splits out of each mixer or each PC into a channel of the mixer. Otherwise, he'll cancel out center.
Go ahead, Lucas, and then Jason.
Yeah, and if he has the choice, I would always say when we have digital at first, we should possibly stay in the digital realm as far as we can. So someone said Dante in the chat. So if we can have everything mixed in the digital realm, that would be of course the best solution. But with the Behringer mixer, I think everything else has been said.
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm going to read between the lines and assume that he's going into an Atem Mini because he mentions HDMI out from the PC. I will add the insanely obvious. If you have the option to go out from the Behringer mixer, then put it on the input of a camera so that your sound is synced and you don't have an issue with that. Avoid those jacks if you can, simply because it complicates things. And if you don't have, audio outs that can be messed with, or if your rig changes a lot, just be very careful on that.
Go ahead, Stuart, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, two things. Firstly, the audio, like the analog headphone audio out of a HDMI connected monitor, will be cleaner than the analog audio output of any PC, because it's a digital connection from the PC to the monitor, and the monitor has got a better quality power supply for keeping the signal clean. The other thing is just something that Tucker pointed out in the chat, which is turn off phantom power, because if you've got an analog input, you do not want to be sending 48 volts back along a headphone input.
Next question.
Gabriel Ong of Malaysia, frequent questioner here. I have an upcoming webinar event where the option of having all panelists be physically present in the same room and run the multicam setup, or have them all remotely call in. What are the pros and cons of each, and which option would you prefer? Thanks.
I will argue, based on the conversation we had earlier, that for most things, unless you have a really good reason to have people physical, it's actually cheaper at this point to send them a kit at home than it is to bring them all into one room and have a production group, manage all of that. And the experience often will be better for the viewers and for everybody involved to, depending on their internet. So I would say the one thing you have to be careful of is, they don't have good internet. Well, that takes away all the fun. If you can get them a hard line, if they have more than 10 megs up and down, I would, at this point in what I'm doing, unless there's a reason that they have to mingle together or there's a reason to put them in, they're all going to work on something together, which a lot of us aren't doing right now, especially in the current situation. I actually think that's a better conversation. I think I talked about this. We did an event with Richard Branson and Elon Musk, and the two of them were talking from their houses, one in Necker Island and then Elon's house. And the two of them were just really talking face to face with each other, and I realized that if they had been in the room together, we wouldn't have had the same camera angles. We wouldn't have been able to see every facial expression and have all those things that we get with what we're seeing here. And so I think that as what we have to solve is the good audio, but we have to remember also that the audio in the room, especially if you have people in the room, was never that good. It's like roomy audio with speakers and all kinds of other things. And so the opportunity to give people better kit and then having them have a better community, you do have to do that. But remember, you're investing in a team that's going to be on the ground, or you're investing in hardware that's going to be in their house. But getting people up to speed on that. And I think as more and more people realize that how they represent themselves in the world is related to their cameras and their mics and their lights, we're seeing large numbers of people who actually care about what people think of them buying a lot of kit, for their houses. I think that's going to be continuing to be a big business. Go ahead, Leo.
You actually covered most of it anyway. As you say, the view, when you are actually sitting in the view, as we are, and if your output is to people who are remote, being able to have both of the speakers or the 4 speakers talking directly at the camera, which means you're effectively sitting in that interviewing slot, is much, much better than having 4 in the room. You will get a better conversation in a way when the cameras are off in the room, but that isn't your event.
Right.
You get a much better conversation always when the camera's off. But if you want the camera to be the best conversation on camera at the moment, I think it's the remote.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, just to build upon that, for the cost of a first-class plane ticket and a few days at a decent hotel, I'm convinced that if Alex is correct and you can get out a kit, which I think you can, the real benefit to somebody who is a high-level speaker is they don't have time to hunt down this hardware. They don't have time to set it up. So, if you build that into the cost, to their compensation, they're going to be delighted. Straight away, they're going to be delighted.
We have events. I mean, for our biggest kits, someone just shows up, puts it up in your house, and then leaves. And what we're finding is a lot of the executives are like, "Hey, how much does it cost? Just leave it here." Like once we set it up, like they set it up, and they're like, "What would it cost me just to not have this go away?" Because they suddenly realized they could have looked a lot better at home for the last 9 months or the last 6 months, and they're frustrated, and they're like, "I want to look like this all the time," and the money isn't that big of a deal to them. Jeffrey and then Courtney.
I'm going to throw out an alternate solution, considering if all these people are coming into the office anyway, and they're doing that and they want to do that, and that is instead of creating different connections for each, have somebody in there as a director and with cameras set up, so it's just one Zoom frame that goes between the switches between the people, and then of course an overall shot as well. I think that would probably be better. If you were doing it like that.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I think the main downfall in the remote type setup is the audio interruption. If it's a free-form discussion, latency and having one person try and interject something or comment on something, the latency is going to, one person talks and the other person starts, and you end up with that. We see it every day in the news when they're interviewing people where they keep interrupting each other, and that becomes kind of destructive to the conversation. So that's why I think on a free-form discussion, it's better to have the people all in the same room. That way they can interrupt each other without, worrying about stepping on somebody, or somebody gets the message that the other person's talking instantly.
I actually prefer the delay for that reason. I mean, I just watched, I watched George Stephanopoulos this week with George Stephanopoulos. This week is a show that I've watched since I was about 15 years old. So I was a little bit of a wonk as a kid. Grew up with a family that runs people's campaigns. You get to be a wonk, and it's gotten to the point now. I don't know exactly what happened, and I don't know how it happened, but it's almost unwatchable because they're stepping on each other all the time. Like it's, the personalities, I think maybe they just got back into the same, it's different personalities, it's not the old ones that understood there was a give and take and a process. So I actually think that it's a better conversation. I think what we do here is a better conversation than what I see on a lot of broadcasts at this point. But I think that that's also wetware, that we've just gotten really good at what we do and have a considerate conversation that is easy to listen to. But the same thing happens inside of, you do have to get into the zone, like inside a Mac break. Though I was on Mac break 2 weeks ago. I'll be on again tomorrow, but I was on Mac break 2 weeks ago, and I couldn't get a word in edgewise because I was used to the flow of this show. I hadn't been on Mac break for a long time, and it's a lot more raucous, with Andy and Renee and Leo. And I realized I had to get back into the fast lane because I'm used to like having a nice, comfortable conversation. Go ahead, Leo.
So I was on something, and they were saying that they say the problem is that you can't have a two-way conversation on Zoom, and you say, but none of you are wearing headphones, and there is your problem.
Right.
And I think that solves, going back to what Courtney was saying, if you use the technology and you actually get people into that mode of using decent equipment. And I've got an event tonight where I've got a world-renowned person on, and we've done exactly what Alex says. We're shipping him a camera, sent all the equipment, and he loves it. And he now uses the equipment when he appears on the BBC for exactly the same reason. It has to be good equipment.
I just love, there was in Boston when my wife was going to school in Boston, there was in her dorm room, there's a Swede and it was really cold, and she's from Southern California, and he told her, she was complaining about the cold, and he goes, "There is no bad weather, just bad clothing." And so and the same thing. It's like you don't have audio video.
Swedish, it's perfect.
Yeah, it just and so I think about that all the time with equipment, is that when you have good equipment, and like a good example is, I used to do post, and then I got into live and spent 10 years doing live. And the first event that I did that included a lot of post, I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot how much I hate post. And Fenwick was just like, you're just not resourcing it well. So I resourced it better, and I was like, yeah, it's a lot more fun when I have the proper resources involved. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, yesterday I mentioned earlier I was on a Zoom conference with some people I know, and I knew it was going to be a train wreck when I got in the invite and it said, if multiple people are in the same house, use the same computer. And I was like, oh God, this is going to be a disaster.
We often had that where people said, we're just going to all just share the webcam. And you're like, oh, that's not going to work. We have to send you more hardware if you're going to do that to make that work. It does work if they're sitting next to each other, but it is painful. That's where, by the way, those kind of zoom ins on 4Ks work really well. That where you can control it, where you have two people sitting next to each other. We used there's a, AJA makes a system that lets you, I can't remember what it's called, but it lets you zoom in on a 4K image. So you have a 4K image and it'll let you do zooms, and you can program them so they animate, they're kind of like animated through that process. Anyway, it's really awesome, but we'd have 3 people there for an all hands, and we could just zoom into each person and get that frame. And it does, that actually works pretty well. And there's other, there's software now that does that, and the Mevos do that, and so on and so forth. But in a pinch, it works well when you don't, especially when you have a teleprompter. Teleprompters are really hard to do pan and tilt. Next question.
Comes from James in Dublin, Ireland, and he says, I just noticed the Logitech 4K Pro magnetic webcam for Pro Display XDR on the Apple Store. Is this the same as the Logitech Brio Ultra HD Pro webcam? If so, then Apple has availability, or there's availability at Logitech.
John?
It is and it isn't. It's the same camera, but it has a different type of mount. So it's designed to magnetically attach to the top of one of the Apple monitors. And so if you don't have the Apple Pro display, it could be a problem for mounting. So just keep that in mind.
Do they both have a quarter 20 on the bottom?
I'll try to find that out. I actually know someone who has that camera on that monitor. And so I'll see if I can figure that out. But it's, I believe I'm going to be surprised if they change that. So I bet you it has the quarter 20 underneath, because especially the way that Logitech does it, the way that they attach it, that you just pull it out, I don't know for sure, but I can probably find out. The problem is you have to persuade someone who has one. It's so scary to pull the to expose this quarter 20 in the Brio, because you basically feel like you're disassembling, you're like gonna break it, and then there's a quarter 20. So I'll find out. Next question.
I've got that wrong, because this one says second hour. Well, we're technically in second hour. Yeah, so okay.
Right at the top of the second hour. So your timing is perfect, and it's 2 hours of Q&A, so it doesn't.
It really doesn't have a second hour this time. And it comes from Val Meekman in Waterloo, I'm assuming Iowa. BitFocus plus Atem Mini. How to run a macro based on a condition. For example, turn on a single button under the complex macro to toggle the switch. Example would be side-by-side button. Hit it once, it will be enabled. Hit it again, it will undo itself. So he wants a toggle state.
Go ahead, Jason.
I believe you could just simply use the option of a toggle button. So you go into companion, and then you go into normal button, and then it's, you've got a few options: up state, down state. You can also just say toggle on, toggle off.
Mm-hmm. All right, go ahead, Lucas.
Yeah, that's correct. The only issue you will have with that is that if the condition changes from somewhere else, then companion, you won't be able to to see that in companion. So if, for instance, you want to mute or unmute with a toggle switch, and you do it on the controlled equipment, you won't see the change in companion necessarily. So that could be a little bit of a problem depending on what you want to do.
That's great. Go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say, which is no small thing. I mean, I'm using a hardware mute, and I know kind of brain and physical that when it's up, I'm on, and when it's down, I'm off. If somebody could change that state, it would really mess me up for that piece of time when it's changed. I expect the state now.
Yep. Next question.
Okay, Idris of Arlington, Virginia, maybe. What's affordable under What's an affordable under $100 mixer with USB, and which one would you recommend for Zoom? Clean audio and a good mic preamp to support dynamic microphones.
$100 is tight.
Get
for
a sound
mixer.
card. I mean,
yeah, go ahead, Mickey, and then Stuart.
Yeah, probably look along the lines of the Focusrite Scarlett Solo. I think it's just over 100 US. But it depending on what dynamic microphone you use, it might not provide enough clean gain. So you might need something like a fat head on top of it, or whatever the other one is, the Cloud Lifter.
Cloud Lifter.
The only thing I'll say, we've talked about this before with the Focusrites, is I use a lot of their higher end equipment. There is no single piece of equipment that has sucked up more of my time setting people up than musicians with the lower end, the Scarletts. The Scarlett line in general has sucked up more, just days and days of my time.
Why do you think this is not in my rack and instead like at my right hand?
Anyway, yeah. Go ahead, Stuart.
Just with that budget limit, I would actually look at using a software-based mixer and getting multiple USB analog in devices, so you can just run each device as a separate USB in.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, the budget.
They're a little bit noisier, but I still would think about the Behringer analogs or the Yamaha analogs. I mean, they're simple. You're going to get a couple inputs. They're not as clean as some of the other stuff, but they just work. And I think at under $100, you're really you want to look for something that may not be as clean as it could be. With Zoom, if you turn off original sound, it'll get rid of all or most of the hiss that you're going to get with those lower end mixers. Go ahead, Lucas.
Yeah, I just want to say that at least in Germany, there's nothing from Yamaha with the USB you could get for under $100. So it's really just a Behringer or something like that.
I thought that there was a Yamaha one that was available, but yeah, Yamaha makes a
perhaps in the US.
Yamaha makes one that's called the MG06, which is like a 6-channel, but it's really 2 XLRs with some unbalanced and line inputs, and that's $99.
Mackie makes a really cheap external sound card too. I want to say it's right around $100.
But that's a nice little simple.
The MG06 has no USB, so if that's what he wanted,
I thought it did.
There's another one which is white, but I don't know the name. That's the one with the USB.
Courtney was showing there's a couple of 89.
Yeah, so go ahead, Leo.
The pre-Sonos that I'm on, the pre-Sonos Studio 24 on eBay at the moment is about $100.
There you go. So anyway, but you just want to be, Next question.
Okay. David Brady of New York is up next with, when running Zoom webinars and meetings on behalf of staff, we feed content, presentation, video roles, website demos, and so forth in as a participant camera feed. Audience reports a soft or blurry experience, regardless of if this feed is spotlit or not. Is it a far end issue, or how we're approaching the problem?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Webinars are 360 for attendees unless you have capability to make them more.
Yeah.
And so if you're doing it as a camera feed, it's 360. If you play the video as a share, then it will be higher resolution.
Yeah, and in general, you have a choice between resolution and frame rate. So if it thinks that you want frame rate because you're doing video, it's going to give you a low resolution. The couple tricks that we've run into in the past is have a Zoom room join or a portal join. If you're in a meeting, that's going to bump you to 720p, so it'll be less blurry. If you are, if you're doing high-end events or events that might be interesting to Zoom, you might be able to request having either your meetings or your webinars or both upgraded to 1080p. and so that you can actually get those things, but it's going to use more bandwidth. And to note that that is a hardship for some of your viewers as well, because it's going to give it to them in 1080p, and it won't be as stable for some folks. And then there is a new feature that we haven't really tested that we should test. I just haven't tested it, is the ability to play out video in the screen share. So it's in the advanced settings, and I haven't looked at what it changes. The hard part for me to test it is I already have a 1080p connection. So we have 1080p here, so I don't know what it will do, because mine will always show at 1080p. So I have to just jump into a different account and try it. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, we had a 360 webinar to attendees, so we don't have the bump up for high resolution, but the advanced screen share of videos did give us full resolution.
And so full frame rate as well?
Yes, it was the best quality we got for video playback. We tried all the options.
That's great. But that's grabbing a video. It has to be H.264, I believe. And it's playing that video out. So it's not like you can't cheat it and have some kind of video in. So if you're doing playouts, it will be a little bit more clunky, for your show than a, hey, let's cut to this, and you just cut to it. That's the big advantage of having a switcher going into it, is that you can, that you can just, it can really be part of a run of show, whereas the screen share is not going to be that. That's going to be more of a, let me show you it, and then we're going to go up to do that. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, you get a Finder dialog, and you choose your file, and check all your files beforehand, because you can open a .mov file, and it might tell you that the actual codec in there is incompatible with Zoom. So only certain ones will it pick. Compressor will fix that for you if you re-encode it. But check all your files. You do get a playhead interface that is not shown to the user, which is nice.
Yeah, and the thing with any of these deliverables, whether you're doing play out to Zoom, all those things, is whether you're using media encoder or handbrake or compressor, is have a setting that you built that you've tested, and then I just run everything through it. I don't try to figure it out. I just go, and I'm going to play it out, and so I'm just going to, and I have a setting that I just throw everything into compressor. For me, it's compressor. Select everything. I drag that onto it. I hit go, and I know that, because, like, for instance, with a hyperdeck, that becomes really important. It will only play one thing at a time. And so by conforming, I'm a big fan of conforming. I do that before I edit as well. I'm old fashioned, where I just grab everything and conform it to my event, and then I start cutting, because it's just faster and simpler. Go ahead, Stuart.
Just in the chat, David answers that they're a 1080p shop, and going to guess it's the downstream people. I would actually suggest, if you're outputting 1080p, make sure the people watching are going full screen on a monitor of the same sort of resolution, because Zoom will bump up their output, or the quality that they see, and eat more of their bandwidth if you're feeding it the higher quality signal to start off with. So that might be something to look at. No small windows, full screen.
Go ahead, Roscoe, and then Jason.
I was just going to say, on that playback engine, it's also helpful if you rename your files, put a 1 in front, 1 dash, 2 dash, 3 dash, because you're using the Finder interface. That way they'll also be ordered in the way you want it to play.
Yep, Jason.
In the past, I've used Edit Ready, and they had a nasty bug that I believe has been fixed. Alex, did you ever share the compressor settings that you use to conform to a hyperdeck?
I don't know if I did. I can put them up. Just remind me in Discord. I'll upload them, and they're not particularly. I mean, it doesn't really matter what it is, as long as it's all the same. It's just like a 422 or 444, depending on what we're doing. But it doesn't matter as much what it is. What it matters is that they're all the same. For that. No, next question.
Charles Klein in New York City here on the panel, and from New York, as I mentioned, it has a question for Mickey specifically. Could you talk about the surround sound system you mix with at your studio?
Hey, Charles. So what I have in terms of my main monitoring system is a Martin Sound Multimax as my monitor controller. I run a 7-1 system in the studio. And for the monitors, I'm using Genelec 8040s for the mains, and then Genelec 7060 for the subwoofer. I did purchase more affordable monitors to start learning Atmos. So I got a pair of JBL 308P Mark IIs just a pair of them, so I can simulate a 712 system. But most of the time when I'm working with Atmos material, I monitor the re-render from the Dolby Atmos render that folds down the Atmos mix to 7.1. But I've been playing around and starting to learn more of the working with objects and Atmos, but I just need downtime to be able to really dive deep into it. But yeah, anything else you wanted to ask in terms of the monitoring system?
No, as we're all trying to push forward with HDR and surround sound, as Alex is pushing the group in that direction, I know the least about sound. So then after I worked with you on that project and I saw the file you gave me, just watching all the channels you gave me and not being able to experience that as you made it is pushing me to want to slowly build up that side of my studio, not to mix because it's not what I do, but to be able to experience what you are creating, so then that can dictate what I'm doing on my side, whether it's in color or in animation, as I hear those things, because I could see every channel that you made, right? But I want to be able to drive what I do through what you've created, or if I get that from somebody else. So as we push forward to just expand the knowledge base, that's my weak part. So that's what I'm trying to learn more.
Yeah, one thing that's great with, I think you mainly work in Resolve, Charles. One thing that's great is that by default, Resolve could read the Dolby Atmos master files. So in the future, like if we end up delivering master files as opposed to, I don't know if
we're starting to get too deep into our project. So, but yeah, so we're sorry.
Let's talk.
Yeah, we'll talk more. And to get back to the question there, I have a discrete 10 speaker system that's JBL 3 series. And that has been a pretty good. I mean, would I do it again with Genelex? Maybe. I wouldn't mind having some Genelex in there, but the JBLs are very serviceable and very good to as far as how they sound. Go ahead, Mickey.
And yeah, that's the main reason why I went with the JBL 308Ps, because they're bang for the buck. Like I got the pair of 8-inch monitors for, I think, an equivalent of $500 US or $600 US.
They're about $250 each.
Yeah. So and
the Genelex for the same size, I think, are like $600 each. I think is the.
No, for the same size, because those are 8-inch ones, they would come out to, I think, $1,200 each. Let me.
$1,200 a pair. 600 each. I think 600 per unit. Go ahead, John.
Hey, Alex. I'm starting to see like 7.4.2 as opposed to like 10. or 11.1. Is what's the real naming convention for these systems now?
It depends. It's because the big thing is that so my system is a 514. So that means that I've got 5 around, 1 subwoofer, 4 above me. So that's a 514. You can do 712, 714. You can do 16.1. You can do the 16.1 is really not. It's like all around. It's a different nomenclature. The big thing with Atmos is it theoretically doesn't matter. That if you're mixing in Atmos, the receiver knows what it has, and Atmos is putting the discrete objects as an object in space, and the receiver is triangulating the position of what has to come out of each speaker to represent that point. Now, it does make a little difference with the bed, but with the actual Atmos objects, it's triangulating that as needed. Go ahead, Jason. And then
just as a footnote to add on to that, if you're looking at a soundbar only Atmos where you're looking for reflective sound, that can change. So don't think that the order is something that manufacturers haven't messed with, unfortunately, because they do.
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I was just taking a look at the Genelec 8050s, which is the 8-inch version of the analog the lowest end family of Genelecs, and it's $1,900 each.
Oh, really? Okay, never
Yeah.
mind. For some reason, I thought that
And
they were.
and that's
I bought some
that's
Genelecs.
why.
Maybe they're smaller Genelecs. I thought that they were about $600, $700
Yeah,
each.
but this
I
is the
don't know.
similar size one, 8-inch
Okay.
roofers.
Maybe
So
I bought
that's why
smaller
I'm
ones.
practicing first on the JBLs, and then when I'm confident that I know what I'm doing already, then I'll rig out actual pipes in the ceiling to hang Genelecs in there.
I will say there's nothing like it. Like it costs money to do this. And the JBL, I wouldn't, if I was getting started, the JBLs are, if it wasn't critical, like I'm mixing something for final, whatever, the JBLs are great, but as an experience, when you get used to it, it's horrible. Like I can barely listen to my home. I have a 7.1 2 at home, and I'm frustrated. Like now that the Office has a 10 discrete speed, a 514. Next question.
Comes from our own Hasmuk Gajar in Cape Town, South Africa, here in the panel. For a function on Thursday, a priest will be remoting to conduct a ceremony. Family members will join into the meeting. Audio and video sorted with Atem, Mix Pre, and a 416. How best do I bring the remote priest into the meeting besides being an attendee?
I think that the most important thing is making sure they have good audio. I think we're gonna just keep saying that. Like they're gonna be whatever. I mean, if I would send them something. I mean, the thing that's gonna be the most distracting is not how you bring them in, but whether you can hear them. For everyone, and whether it's going to be clear. I've done a couple things where we've been brought in to work on things that are some ceremony related thing, and there's just nothing worse than. I mean, literally every single time it's been roomy audio, and it's just like you're trying to listen to them say something profound, and you're just like, what are they saying? Because it's just echoey and whether it's no matter what faith they come from, audio is not part of the faith, evidently, because it's just like over and over and over again. That seems to be something that no faith seems to get to. I'm looking for the audio faith where we just believe in that it's really important for us to have good audio.
The Church of Audiophile, yes.
Yeah. So the but I think that we sending the most important thing you can do is send them a mic, and then after that, I think that it's a matter of, are you doing a webinar or are you doing a
meeting? A meeting.
Yeah, I mean, then making them a co-host, and I think that those are all the things that. But again, just making sure that they have good internet and good audio. I mean, even their video can be okay. But wow, I mean, like every time, and my wife works for a meditation center, so I walk by and watch. All she does is run meetings, and some of them, when she has the speakers open, which isn't very often, I get to listen to it, and some of them are getting better. Like a lot of them who do it a lot are getting better, but when they first start, until they hear themselves, as soon as they hear themselves, they fix it. It's when they don't hear their own recordings that they have no sense of how bad they sound. It's like someone who has never used a mirror. Anyway, I'm Bill, and then Leo.
It really is kind of surprising that nobody has come out with a very, 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 very simple kit yet that has a webcam, huddle cam type thing or something like that with a little balanced audio, simple connector out that leads to a little pile-like headset that just does that one thing well. Put up a camera and sound good quickly without a lot of cost.
I think that there'd be a big business in building just all-in-one kits that had the mic and the webcam and the mic and the lights and everything else. I just don't know who in this panel could possibly, build something like that. Guy. Anyway, Leo and then Hasmuk.
So having to do a panel tonight with 4 rabbis, I know exactly what you mean. One of which appears on TV all the time and is basically an embarrassment when he appears on TV because of his video and audio, and we've tried to fix it a number of times. However, coming back, one of the things we moved away from big microphones, we moved away from headset microphones, and we went to lapel because it was just easier to explain to them where to put a lapel microphone so that it sounded reasonable. I'm not saying it sounded as good as this. It definitely doesn't, but you need something that somebody can understand. And the other thing we do when we've done funerals is we give them the Rode, the Bluetooth Rode that they can just clip on, and then they can walk around with that, and that's about as good as we can get.
And that's why we've really standardized on headset mics on the Piles or the Polsons, because we actually had too much trouble with the labs. And we were like, it does take us a little bit to have them figure it out, but once they get it on, they can't do anything that gets rid of it. Go ahead. But it's always between the lav and the headset is kind of where we're always going between, and we just like the sound of the issue is that the headset is so close to their mouth, no matter what their room is doing, they'll sound fine. Hosmuk?
Yeah, I asked this question because I'm looking forward to a celestial experience, not a lesson in audio chain. So.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. Next question.
Joe Washer of Atlanta.
And we're cruising on a lot of questions. So we're gonna, if I cut you off or if I don't get past 2 or 3 people, it's just because we have a lot of questions. Next question.
Joe Washer, Atlanta, Georgia. When you talk of shipping kits to people, what do you do about lighting? How do you avoid that person sitting with a window to one side of their face? Meaning, how and when do you coach this person to?
We generally coach them away from the window. Like we don't want your window. We want you to close it, and then we send you a light. It can be a ring light. Right now, our current standard, it's constantly changing, but our current standard are the Nan Light LumaPad 25s. We send 1 or 2 of those for our smaller kits, and our larger kits are the 68Bs, and 2 of those for the large kits. And those are that's kind of our standard operating procedure for almost everything that we do. If you are going to use natural light, you have to rehearse them at the same time as your event. That's all I'll say is to always rehearse them at the same time as your event if they're going to be using natural light, because you just don't know what's happening. And even then, it can be sunny one day, cloudy another. It's, any studio person will always just try to avoid the windows. For every day that it turned out happily well and it looked good, there's 5 days of bad video. Anyone else have any other comments about that? But getting them away from the windows is usually something we do pretty quickly if we can, for a higher profile event. And then we send them lights. If they don't have any lights, then you have to start working with the windows, because that's the only way to do it. But you have to know what they look like at the same hour as your event. Lucas and then Courtney.
Yeah, Alex, what do you do to mount the NAND lights? Do you send a stand?
Use little light tripods. We use ones that are small enough that can be desk mounted. So I don't have them right in front of me, but they're like little tripods you can just set on your desk and pop them up. The NAND Light also makes one that's even smaller that has its own little desk thing, and I can't figure out how to put it together. If I can't figure it out, then I don't want to send it out. I mean, I can, but it's just like, oh, this is weird. It's the one that uses the backlight that goes up behind me in my office that's white. That's one of those, but I don't understand it. So we just send a small tripod that could theoretically be put on the floor and almost get up high enough, but definitely can sit on a table and do it. We used to do ones that were all floor mounted, but we ended up in a lot of situations where they couldn't use them. Go ahead, Courtney.
I think we've talked about it before, but there's this company that makes this thing called Crew in a Box, which is a flight, a urethane case shipping box that has a teleprompter camera and the light panels that you can see there in the lower left corner, that fold out. So it's all one shipping kit. A lot of networks are using this for their remote kits that they send out because everything's in one. Although the lighting tends to be fairly flat and fairly front lit.
Yeah,
it gives you a big panel that looks like a window, but it's in the right direction.
We spent a lot of time analyzing this when it first came out, internally at our company, because we build ones that are roughly the same quality. It's $50,000, $40,000 to $50,000 a unit to buy them, and $5,000 a day to run them, to rent them. So it's pretty cost prohibitive for most people. In addition, the placement of the lights and at the distance has 2 problems. One is that it's a very flat lighting, so it's not very. It's not great for a lot of people. Secondly, having the lights that close to the teleprompter makes it very hard to read it. And so one of the reasons that we move the lights so far away from our teleprompters is specifically because having a dark area behind the teleprompter makes it much easier to read. And so we want to move those lights out, basically almost out of your periphery. So that's why we bring them up closer and put them up. Ours takes a little bit more work to put together, but the other problem is that you got to figure out where to put that box. You got to figure out what table or what coffee table or whatever. And so it's highly limited in how you use it. And there's so many places where the structure of what you do limits the creativity. And so that ours can kind of get put anywhere. It can be on the other side of a table, in someone's bedroom, in their den, whatever, and you can kind of put it down. And it's just a tripod with a teleprompter. It does almost exactly the same thing as this one. But we had kind of an existential conversation, like, should we be making ones that just look like this? So there was a lot of conversation about it, and in the end we decided not to because we think it's overpriced and under featured for what we need. It doesn't solve it perfectly. Ours doesn't either, but it falls down in places that we can't afford. Next question.
Jonas Dautel of Reutlingen back. Has somebody tested if the new Zoom video playout can support growing files?
Ooh, I doubt it. It should, though. I mean, here's the thing. If the growing file is, the one thing I would say is that if the growing file is a set, most growing files are set. You say it's 3 hours long. It's more of a function of the thing writing the file than it is the thing reading the file. If it's a QuickTime that thinks it's 3 hours long, it just keeps on adding segments. The question is the only thing that I would say is that I don't think it will update unless you reopened it. So it won't know to, like Final Cut used to have this problem with growing files are a file that you can add to something like Final Cut, and it keeps on adding video, but after that video is like black. So it just gives Final Cut something. It just keeps on adding segments to it. But Final Cut, you used to have to reload that video every single time you wanted it to update. And I think that's improved, but I would be very surprised if Zoom knew to do that. Go ahead, Jason.
There's an option that says optimize local recording for NLE, and I believe they've made a considerably, they've made some advancements on what that means, but I have not tested it for growing files.
I think it's a keyframe issue, I think it's just where it lays keyframes and how big the GOP is going to be that solution. Next question.
Yeah, I think the ones that actually do that, like Softron's video recorder, use a whole different cloud system. Anyway, Alton Christensen in Brooklyn picked up this Feel World 7-inch monitor and have had to return it twice with damaged display issues. Big black ink light spots in the LCD. That doesn't sound good. Looking for an alternative in the same price range, plus or minus $400. Or
go ahead, Stuart.
I'm going to give you a 3-part answer. The first is those sorts of dots on an LCD display normally are from impact damage. So I would check with your shipping and make sure it's not being squished on the way. And B&H will probably want to use that. The second part is if you follow that link for B&H, and under the green bar at the top of the website, you've got a line of text that reads out Home, Professional Video Monitors, Professional Video on Camera Monitors, and then the FeelWorld one. Click on the Professional Video on Camera Monitors, then scroll down on the left-hand side, and you can put in a price range, and it will give you all of the monitors that B&H stock that match that price range of the FeelWorld one, and you'd be able to choose a replacement, and they would probably swap from which one, because you've had a bad experience with the FeelWorld ones. The third part of the answer is a link I'm about to put in the chat, and this is monitors that I've recently had experience with and found to be very good, easily as good a viewing experience as the Blackmagic monitors. So there's all 3 parts of that.
In the past, I've used a lot of, for inexpensive monitors, a lot of Lilliputs, but I don't think they, in iCans, but most of my monitors at this point for on camera are the Blackmagic ones because of a lot of the features that they have in them, especially the scopes and so on and so forth. Next question.
Courtney here in the panel of Hollywood, California. Can Jonas talk about his Raspberry Pi emulator of the Blackmagic HyperDeck Mini?
Not today. He can't talk about it today because we're giving Jonas an entire second hour on Wednesday. So we will definitely Jonas. We're going to talk about it, the whole Jonas's solution on Wednesday. We're really excited to have him on. Go ahead, Roscoe, real quick.
Can we get a quick teaser?
Tell us what it is, Jonas, and then that's it. We'll save it.
It's a video player that uses the HyperDeck protocol, so you can do fun stuff like this.
All in
the Atem macros and controller.
Yeah. So it looks like an Atem to the switcher, but it's just a Raspberry Pi.
Like an HyperDeck.
And it works like a HyperDeck.
Talk cost.
$82 of hardware.
Yeah, that kind, and like $20 for the software.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that. We're gonna show that. We're gonna spend an hour talking to Jonas about that on Wednesday. All right, next question.
Chris Widener of Lafayette, Indiana says, I'm trying to plan out an awards show for a nonprofit foundation, and they really don't want to use Zoom. I'm testing Larix. That way I can just send out a kit based around a mobile phone kit. Has anyone used this and any problems they might have experienced?
So my understanding is the Larix, I play with it a little bit, not in an actual show, but it's an SRT. I mean, it can do a lot of different ones, but the typical one that you use for contribution would be SRT. You're not going to have the same latency that you have with Zoom. So if people are presenting and you're going from one presenter to another, it'll be fine. If people are talking to each other, it will not be fine. Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, have given it a go. The biggest problem with it is getting ports open so you can bring it into your production environment.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's been used on a lot of projects, and so I mean, there's definitely a lot of building around it, and it's an interesting contribution platform. But in general, I know a lot of people are using it, but I still don't consider SRT fast enough to do conversation. So I think that's the challenge there. Next question.
Gabriel Ung in Malaysia was using a Dante virtual sound card, sending audio over his network to a Dante Avio stereo XLR output. The audio started breaking into static distortion after 15 minutes. A power cycle of the Avio restored the audio, but it would start distorting again. What could be possible issues? Bad PoEs, clocking, or something?
We'll see. I have an answer I think is right, but go ahead, Jeff.
I would take a look in the Dante controller and take a look at the latency, and it gives you a graph that shows you how the Dante virtual sound card is doing as far as packets leaving and arriving, and seeing if any of them are falling outside of its latency spec.
Go ahead, Jason.
I've never had a mistake that I can't fix with murdering green settings on a switch.
This is every time we've had this problem. It is the eco setting. It's the eco setting in the routers and the switches. So the switches hidden in these switches are eco settings, and they work right when you turn them on because they don't know what you're doing yet. And then as soon as they decide that you're not using them very heavily, they turn down their responsiveness for the network. And so every time you plug them in, Dante works great, and then it breaks up, and it just comes apart in the atmosphere. And it took us. I hope that this helps you, because it took us days to figure this out in a big conference center, trying to figure out why we kept on. And then finally, we went through and turned off every eco setting that was possible in these routers. For a large corporation, eco settings make a big difference, but you don't want to use them for your audio. So that has, since we've become dogmatic about turning off our eco settings in every. I mean, that's the first thing that happens when a switch comes in, not a router, but a switch. Is we just go in and we figure out how to get into it and how we turn it off, or we get really dumb switches that don't have that. But eco settings are not your friend when it comes to Dante. Anyway, that's been anyone else? Okay, next question.
Gabriel Ung's back from Malaysia. He asks, has anyone on the panel tried Run the World webinar platform? It was started by two former Facebook employees. Its primary selling point is networking and engagement between attendees even after the event is completed. It has a free tier for unlimited events up to 500 attendees as well.
Go ahead, Sky.
We're experimenting with it for Matt in the kitchen. I will be happy to report if we end up using it.
Let us know. I mean, Sky, definitely put it in when you've done some. I haven't played with it, so I don't have any opinion. But let us know what you think of it. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, again, I have a relationship with John. I'd love to stay within the Zoom universe, and again, they approached us. So again, if the infrastructure is not as strong, robust, engaging, we'll find out.
Yep. Next question.
James in Dublin, Ireland is back with the chat in Mukana is a great feature, but it vanishes when Mukana is reset, making it hard to respond after hours. Could a chat channel embedded from Discord be an alternate option, even if that's possible, if that's even possible?
Go ahead, Jason.
That's not a bug, it's a feature. I think that's actually exactly the way that Mukana is intended to work. I think the non-ephemeral, the permanent, the archivable, the searchable is Discord. That's just the way that, the way we set this up.
For now. It's a good way. So there's
called dramatic foreshadowing. Something's coming, maybe.
Yeah, we're working on
I'm sorry,
stuff.
I forgot the dun dun dun.
Yeah, so at the moment that's the way we kind of think about it. But I definitely am thinking about, we've done this in the past where each event is its own URL theoretically, and it lives in time, both before and after. But there's a whole bunch of infrastructure things that have to change before we can make that work. Go ahead, Stuart.
Isn't our own Sky Gleason been posting a copy of that in Discord for everybody to search?
Yep.
You
can always search it there. Easy? It's mostly a matter of whether you keep on having the discussion is the question. Roscoe?
I was going to say the same thing. Benjamin and Sky have been doing a great job, and it's the link. So when you put a link in, it's really helpful if you put a little description of what the link, people can click on the link, but sometimes it's like this link, just put 3 words in what the link is. They're not always right where the question is. And
Next question.
Lucas Herzog in Mainz, Germany. It says, looking for a software that copies files in a folder on change on Windows. Any suggestions?
Go ahead, John.
SyncToy. It's by Microsoft. It sounds silly, but it works great. It has a GUI. You can automate it, schedule it. It's the perfect toy for Windows.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, +1 on SyncToy. Another way to do it would be, SyncToy basically makes use of the very old RoboCopy infrastructure in Windows, which is, goes back to cron jobs, and it works really well.
Next question.
Mark Hadley in Seattle says, looking for recommendations for an in-ear dual-ear headphone for presenters, or on another day, a Mickey. Secondly, is wired headphone necessary to be a Mickey?
It's so complicated now. We start using the prices in our own internal. So for everyone who's listening, $700 is an Alex, $3,200 is a Mickey, $11,000 is a Charles. So anyway, go ahead, Mickey. You want to answer that?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the sidekicks from Bumblebee Industries, and I think Guy is holding that up. Yeah, and those are very, very discreet in-ears that work well for on-camera talent. I believe Alex typically uses the
Ear Heroes. And well, for dual ear, I use the Ear Heroes. For single ear, I use the audio implements. For a in-ear audio implements is kind of the standard. It's just used by everyone, so it's really easy to interchange with other people's hardware. Go ahead, Mickey.
And yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the Mark means by necessary to be a Mickey, but in terms of pure audio fidelity, the Bumblebee, the sidekicks, and also the audio implements and the Ear Heroes, they're not really meant to be used as critical monitoring devices. They're excellent though for communications and just monitoring program audio for content, not for critical decision making for sound.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jason.
And one more add-on on that. These, by the way, I've played around quite a bit and eventually just decided, if I'm going to use this, I want it to sound correct. I want it to sound like my studio monitors. The Shure 800 series of in-ear monitors are quad driver, and they're absolutely fantastic. Do not, if you're going with wireless in-ear monitoring, do not get cheap wireless. You will regret it. The ones that are $200 on Amazon, don't go there. It really, trust me, they're terrible.
The DPA makes a headset, and I don't know whether you're trying to get this question. It makes a headset that has an in-ear built into the headset, which I haven't bought yet. It's so tempting, but the idea that you can just pop it all on and it just go into an ear. You wouldn't normally use 2 ears for a presenter that's on stage or something, but maybe in room, just because usually when they're on stage they need to hear something else. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, here's a shot of those in. You can barely even see them. I mean, they use them as what is it that John Edelstein uses?
Yeah, he uses the
not so
N-ear as do I during the show. N-ear,
Gotcha.
N-ear.
Yeah,
Same thing.
it's like
basically.
fishing wire. I mean, it's so thin. I mean, that it just blew my mind. They are a little bit more of a hassle to get in and off, though. So I'm sticking with my Sennheiser IE40 Pros on a daily because these ones take a little longer to get in, but they're nice.
And the Ear Heroes are a little bit more affordable and they sound pretty good. But I'm seriously looking at a Bumblebee. The Ear Heroes are about $150, so they're not as expensive in that area, and they're used heavily in security. Like that's what, and then if you really want truly wireless, then you're starting to talk about Phonak. So in some of the studios we work at, they use Phonaks for them. Those are just, if you watched anything like Jack Bauer pulling out a thing and putting it in his ear, that's actually an auto. Of all things, it doesn't actually work at all. But they use them. They it's a prop. But the one that acts like that is the Phonak, and that doesn't have a huge range, but it is truly wireless, and there's no belt pack or anything else. It's a you can transmit into a system, and you can actually, oddly enough, when they come out of the box, they run at 75 megahertz, which is the same as the Comtex. So that you can actually use a Comtech transmitter for a lot less money.
I think they're 216 now, Alex. But maybe they've
Comtex do 75 and 216.
72.
Yep, they have. We used to have a 216 and a 75, but the 75 is compatible directly without any tuning with the Phonak in ears. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, and just in case anyone wants to know, like the Jack Bauer, the in-ear thing where I love it, they're running around the city and stuff. The range, basically like 40 nothing feet. Like 40 feet Bluetooth, every time I see it on screen when someone smashes one of those with their feet, I'm like, those are really expensive.
Yeah, not the auto ones. The auto ones are cheap, but they don't work.
Yeah.
The auto makes one that has like a inducer that you put under your shirt and it works, but it's cheap and it's super low power, so you can't hear anything. So the Phonak ones are incredibly freeing, though. You do feel like a spy when you wear them. I used to own one, and I used to use it for all my shows. Anyway, we're going to jump to the next question because we're running out of time.
Okay, moving on to Jeff Francis of Columbia, South Carolina, in the panel. What do you do when the talent has ignored your guidelines and given you an intro video that is bad? Low resolution, low frame rate, poor sound, Zoom recording, and then said, I think it'll be okay? Do you demand requests that they re-record?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
If you can't get them to change, take your name off the credits.
I mean, yeah, the biggest lesson is you play it. The key is you leave it in writing. A lot of times what happens for me is that I just leave it in writing. Like, we highly recommend that we this is the problem. We outline all the problems. In the end, the client is the client, and you outline for them what all the risks are. And then when they play it out and people tell them about it later, it was a lesson. They'll do it better next time. But it's at some point you can't always save everybody from themselves. Go ahead, Stuart.
You run a rehearsal with a select group of their friends and ask their friends to give them direct feedback. So it's the same as Alex's answer, but the day before the event.
Yeah. But rehearsals are good for that. We get a lot of that. There's nothing, but what there is that, go ahead.
I did get them to agree to actually we're doing a Q&A after these pre-recorded interstitials. So they're professionally shot and edited concert videos. And then this terrible low frame rate thing is going to be an introductory video in between each of the actual music concert videos. So a huge difference in this pre-recorded hour-long concert. And then we get to a Zoom Q&A at the end of it. So I did get them to agree to come in and do a tech check tomorrow for a Friday concert at the same time as the Q&A is going to be. So we're going to check everybody's lighting, sound, internet.
And how much would it take to re-record them? These are like little intros, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to ask them to re-record those tomorrow.
Yeah.
At the end of our tech check, once their sound and light is good.
It's like every day for us to persuade somebody to, not show up at a formal event in a t-shirt and cutoffs with flip-flops. That's what we constantly tell them is you're going to a formal event in front of a lot of people. You probably should wear something better. That's all. We're going to jump to the next question because we're running out of time.
Kalak Lopez Waterman in New York says, does anyone make a plugin that allows for actual pan tilt zoom control into a virtual environment like Maya, Vectorworks, Blender, or the like? Note for clarification, it would be so cool to be able to connect your PTZ controller to virtual cameras in a virtual environment to rough in presets ahead of an install.
Panasonic, I believe it's the 150, has telemetry data that goes in and out of Unreal Engine. Or can be piped in and out of the Unreal, and I believe it's the 150 that has that. But if you do a search for Panasonic PTZ, it's the only one I know of. I mean, there are other ones that are higher end, but the only one that I know of that's all in one that does it. I don't like Panasonic cameras the way they look and feel most of the time, but it's the only one that I know of that's passing telemetry data as a standard build that comes into you. Next question.
Lucas, Herzog of Maine says, looking into Studio Technologies Dante intercom units, thanks Tucker, has someone used their base stations, model 5421 and 5422 in production, and how are they doing?
The base stations are what we've had the most trouble with, is that they don't scale super well and they're a little tricky to get set up. What Tucker has done is gone to the Symmetrics, to build the routing for those. And so the base stations have been the thing that we've been most challenged by. When we get over, and I admit maybe we just don't know them as well, because when we're under 5 belt packs, we just pipe them into as a separate bus in our mixer. like we just, if it's just a handful of belt packs, we just use another bus in an X32 or a Q01, and we just manage everything in a couple buses. If we are doing, once we go over that, you can't do that because you got too many mix minuses. You start chewing up channels. And so Tucker's using the Symmetrics, and we did get a base station recently, and it just was frustrating. Go ahead, Lucas.
Yeah, he just mentioned in chat and to me yesterday that he actually rather uses the BSS Blue DSPs instead of the
he
Symmetrics.
might be using that. I think he and I had talked about Symmetrics because I'm familiar with Symmetrics. But
I think
BSS
Doug
Blue,
has
yeah.
the Symmetrics one.
Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
If I remember.
Yeah. Sorry, no headset on. So I have the Symmetrics, and Tucker and Jeff Keithley both helped me set it up. And Tucker in the chat likes the blue, the BSS better. He the way he explained it to me was that it was just a simpler back end on how you set it up. And I'll make a graphic of kind of our comms. It looks scary, but once you break it down, it's not. But when you're in a multi, solution comm system, having this hardware device that I turn on and it works, I mean, it's, I have fought comms left and right. And like Alex has said, if you have good comms, you're going to have a good show.
Comms are everything. It's just the thing. We're going to talk about it more tomorrow. Next question.
Mark Harder in Brooklyn's up next with Mickey. What's the front end of your processing for Atmos? Is it all in the DAW? Do you send multiple outputs, or is it all in Resolve?
So yeah, I do all my mixing, all the processing in my DAW, which is Pro Tools, and I use Dolby Audio Bridge to send all the channels out of Pro Tools into the Dolby Atmos render. And the mix is essentially put together in the render. What you need to send out of the DAW when you're working with Atmos is the actual audio stream and a metadata stream, which includes the panning information. So out of Pro Tools, I am sending multiple outputs right now. Since I'm just still learning this, I'm not utilizing all 119 objects that you can send to the render. So at the moment, I'm just playing around 64 objects, and then with just for now just one bed. But as I learn, then I'll make it a bit more complex.
Next question.
Val Neekman of Ontario, Canada is looking for a comparison between the Rodecaster Pro, the MixPre 6 II, and wants to know which is better for general use and for automation with Stream Deck. And he wants you to assume the user is not an audio person. He's looking for set and forget it preferred, and also as much future proofing as possible.
Go ahead, Jason.
That's a strange two things to compare, in my opinion. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, the Rodecaster is consumer grade to the nth degree. It is very set and forget. It's very easy. The MixPre 6 does a little bit more. I don't know. I am so heavily biased on this that I've got to hand it off.
Go, Jeff.
Finding mute button, sorry. If they're not an audio person and it's for general use, I would steer them away from the MixPre. Love the MixPre, but I think the complexity is probably going to be too much.
I think that the thing that I would say is that with the MixPre, if you really want set and forget, I'm going to send you something. I would rather have the MixPre than the Rode, because the Rode exposes too many controls. If they have to actually do anything with it, if I'm going to send something to them and say, plug these things in, and then it works, I would actually prefer a MixPre, because all I got to do is turn it on. If I want them to actually be able to pan, or not pan, but fade things up and down, I would not give them the MixPre, or if they have to change anything in that configuration, because a non-audio person is going to get lost, pretty quickly in the MixPre. Whereas the Rode got a lot of stuff in front of you that you can see. So I think that I actually think set and forget, I'd lean more towards the MixPre because of that, that setup, because I think there's not much you can do. I mean, if you leave it locked in.
USB Pre?
Well, if you want just an IO, that's what we're talking about here. That's what we send out if we really want you to not do anything at all. But we can't do. This is the USB Pre too, and I think at some point I had 50 or 60 of these, and these are the tanks that you just plug in and they always just work, and there's not much to do, and it's all just little bits that you pop. Anyway, we'll talk about that another time. We're going to run out of time. Next question.
Scott Wasserman in Detroit, Michigan wants to know, so he's sending out a remote kit for a pre-recorded speaker session. The speaker requested something that does not go on her face. Recommendations for a lav or tabletop mic setup.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I'd probably go with a Countryman B3 or B6 lav, or probably a COS 11 lav with an XLR adapter. I would try to, as mentioned by Alex numerous times, try to stay away from microphones that are placed in a certain spot, because as they move around, you'll get inconsistencies with the pickup.
I have slowly, after ridiculing it for many years, have slowly come around to an Omni mic that's pointed down. That's BBC. The BBC does this thing that, and Mickey's heard me like I can't. It drives me crazy to see it. Every time you watch the BBC, you'll see all their mics are pointed down like this. And I had a discussion with an engineer at BBC, and he finally persuaded me that, because I was like, it sounds different. He's like, it doesn't. It doesn't sound different. You just don't get any air. Like, you don't get any air. So if you watch BBC, though, they're always, if you watch the world news, all their labs are pointed down. And I feel like I hear more paper rustle, but I've been persuaded that the way where it's at, you're not getting more. What you aren't getting is air going down from their nose. So anyway, think about, but always get Omni, by the way, for labs. They make them, not always, but if you're sending someone at their house, do not give them a cardioid, because if it turns a little bit like this, you're in never land. So there are reasons to use something like a WL 185 or whatever, but very carefully. Jason and then Courtney, real quick, and then we'll move on.
The only thing that I would add to that is, if your speaker is disciplined and is willing to take the time, a shotgun can sound great. If you're willing to walk them through it, and send them, of course, the stuff you need to get it to look right.
We've been really happy we used to send them out before we really got obsessed with headsets, with the Blue Yeti, the full size Blue Yeti. I don't have any experience with the Nano, but the full size Blue Yeti, just off of camera, pointed the right direction. Sounds actually pretty darn good. Go ahead, Courtney.
And since the subject is a woman, a consideration is wardrobe, because a lot of women wear silk or things that are really bad for lavaliers, and especially if she mentions that she's conscious of not wanting anything on her face, she may not want to have anything on her clothing as well, so you'd have to hide it, and that, you know, you're asking for a lot more clothing noise with a woman because you can't just clip it on a lapel like most men.
We don't know what
wearing jackets. We don't know where the wardrobe is.
We don't know what the price range is, but I can't think of the name of the show now. Hold on, like I can find it really quickly. But there's a show that they've really nailed this. I just know because a friend of mine is on. Friend of mine's on it. Is it called the Dag Nabbit? Trying to
Can we buy a vowel?
Is Dag Nabbit in its second season now?
Yeah,
Few
it
more
is.
words.
It's Style Pop. It's
Is it a reality show?
No, it's a discussion. It's like The View. It's like
okay.
The Real. So The Real is a you know, it's like The View or that type of thing. But what they did is they made jewelry out of all the labs. It's so smart. Like it's just, you know,
lab.
Yeah, and so a friend of mine that I've done a lot of shows with is one of the hosts on it. So I was watching it to just see how she was doing, like what she was doing now, because we were talking about it, and suddenly noticed that all the labs were jewelry. They look like jewelry except they're labs. It's just it
so
really
you like
works.
make
So
a brooch or you make a tie clip or something.
It's like brooches. They're clipped onto them and they're in different places. And if you know what you're looking for, you'll see them. But otherwise, the labs are totally embedded. They built those, and that wouldn't be that hard to do. Like, you know, like that wouldn't be hard to take a current one and build something that you could just put onto someone that looks nice, and then you're not trying to figure out how to hide it. And that would go back to the Countryman. Like the Countryman lab would probably be a great one because you just have, it's really nice small capsule that you can hide in there. A Countryman or a DPA, you can just hide inside of some kind of container. You just have to think about how it affects their audio too. So you have to think through that process. Next question.
John M. Gerard of Berkeley, California. I've been looking on B&H's photo catalog or site and saw that there are many Pile Pro mics, wired headsets, and wireless headsets for under $40 US. Do you think any are good? And if any would work well enough for the iPhone 12 Pro Max? And is this the same company you guys are always recommending?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, we do a Clubhouse mic check, which the iPhone 12 regular microphone won out, but Shane Foley came in with and I believe the Pulsons are slightly better than the Piles. Just for $7 more, pay for them. But you plug that into the splitter. I put all these links in there, and then obviously go into the Lightning to 3.5 adapter.
I want to test this. Ceramonic makes a bunch of them that go in, and I just haven't tested them recently. We've used a lot of Ceramonic stuff, but they have their own little lab mics that will go into that, but haven't had time to test them. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle. How was Stuart's recon on his live shoot? Stuart?
I think we lost Stuart. Is Stuart? Oh, there he is. My layout keeps changing. Anyway, go ahead, Stuart.
Well, I got to enjoy a new monitor that I'm highly recommending, which is the little Fotka ones, although they could do with some LUTs. I got to fly a drone over a forest. That's fun without losing it.
What drone?
And just a Phantom 2, because I didn't take the F550 with me. And I got to sit my Scion next to a BMD G2 with nearly identical lenses under the same lighting and see that, yes, I can match my camera to the G2. So I'm happy, because that means we can do our action shots on global shutter and our close-up and dramatic shots on the rolling shutter with the skin tones. Easy.
It's great. I would love to see.
I'm not sharing the footage from Portland though for the shoot that's happened since with the dunes and the blowing, and I was probably closer to Grant's place than I am.
Next question.
Nolan Maurice of Minneapolis says, any general guidance on budgeting for talent? My specific situation is an over-the-top commercial with no speaking roles and one off-screen VO.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
Well, over the top usually means bad acting, so Craigslist is an option. But often little theaters are often. So, boy, I apparently offended several people in the room.
You can actually get some, I mean, especially when you don't have voice roles, you can get some pretty good actors from stage. You know, the hard part is they're used to overacting. They're used to, stage, you get trained to do everything bigger because people have to see it. And so there is a big distinction between when I was a stage actor for a while. And the funny thing
back
is
of the
that,
theater, you got to be heard.
well, the funny thing is, when I first started, the director kept on saying, "You're really good. You'd be really good for TV." And I thought that was a compliment, but what he meant was, "You're not projecting.
Be bigger."
Like it was his nice way of saying you got to pull it up a little bit. So they're used to that. That's the distinction. But we have found a lot of great actors in San Francisco, at least. In Minneapolis, you actually have a pretty good production community there, so you should be able to get out there, and there should be some communities to find them. And it'll be whatever you negotiate if they're non-SAG, which you shouldn't in a small OTT. I think that SAG would be pretty cumbersome, for you to use for that kind of show. Go ahead, Stuart.
OTT can also refer to using YouTube as your delivery platform, but a website that a lot of people use down here is Star Now, which has got actors and models and whatever you're listing, and they've got photos, their experience, and whatever, and it's reasonably useful. Yeah. I'll put a link in.
And to note that there are a lot of more flexible rules if your budget is under $75,000, I think, for SAG. So if you want to use SAG, there's a lot of more flexible situations that are possible, and you will find a different class of actor for this kind of thing if you do a search through SAG. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, and also sometimes voiceover comes with whatever the actor or performer who's bringing to that brings with them. And I say that specifically because you hear about somebody like John Krasinski getting millions of dollars to do a telephone thing. That only happens because his voice is attached to a character that everybody loved from The Office, who was intelligent and kind of writing above everybody else. And they want that power of the connection between his voice and his previous character to bring authenticity to the work he's now doing to pitch the phone. So that's why they get huge money.
But as far as the actors go, I mean, it really is. I mean, we've gotten actors where we paid them thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars. It just depends on what you need them for and what they're doing. But it's just another negotiation. There's not any guidelines. It just depends on how big your budget is and what you need to do it. Go ahead, Jason.
So just a quick question. That $75,000, is that the total production budget or the talent budget?
Production budget has to be below $75,000 to be in what they call experimental for SAG. I believe that's the number. There was talk of it changing, and I don't know where it is, but there was a experimental budget under $75,000 that has a lot less restrictions than the normal ones. You still have to pay attention to your production timing. With all the unions, you need to pay attention to when meal breaks are and little things like that. But it just makes you run your event like a grown-up. That's all. I mean, that's the way I at first it was very cumbersome for me, but then I grew up and figured out how to do it, and it's been good for all my crews. Get trained by a local to keep everybody fed. Anyway, next question.
Tom Wineland of San Francisco says, "Hello all, I have an Apple TV 4 box and would like to get its output to a component-only plasma TV screen. Any suggestions for a converter adapter? Thanks."
All right, go ahead, Jason.
Monoprice. Get the most expensive Monoprice. They've got an all-in-one component composite and even S-video, and it'll all go out to HDMI, and that's your way to go.
Next question.
I don't know how to pronounce this person's name. If it is a person, BTRU, small BT, large RU from San Jose, California, is NDII or NDI2?
NDIHX.
NDIHX to be avoided for audio support, opting for Dante, then joining it to a live stream at the switcher or server. Note, Bill Thompson. Oh, I'm sorry for what it's worth, Bill Thompson's name. Excuse me, Bill.
All right, go ahead, Stuart. Stuart's a big fan of NDIHX. He loves it. He's like Stuart.
Comedians all around me. I've got crazy people to the left. I've got cats sneezing. Yeah. NDI good, NDIHX bad. Use Dante instead.
Yeah, good, Doug.
Yeah, I would second use Dante instead. I've had my own problems with NDI audio, and yeah, Dante is much better.
Next question.
Can you tell I don't always give time to pre-read? Alex 4D Golner in London, our friend, says, anyone know of any good HDR program or HDR TV channel branding design that uses HDR, the detail that cannot be seen in SDR, and has detail, I guess, that cannot be seen in SDR?
Check out Samsung's demos on YouTube. So YouTube, you can upload HDR10. And Samsung uploaded a bunch of HDR10 example files, and they're really cool. But they have some graphics on them because they're showing you what makes it HDR versus SDR, and so they're using graphics incorporated. And it is some of the most compelling. I will say Samsung's examples that they threw up on YouTube are some of the most compelling HDR examples I've seen as far as training your eye to this is like if you haven't done a lot of HDR work to understand why HDR is important. Samsung did that better than I've seen anybody else do. Like that. It's just a really, really great set of example files. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah. And then if you locally want to see like the biggest difference, you'll have to get the same HDR source and then pipe it to two different monitors, one that is SDR, one that is HDR. And you will see, like, for example, in the monitors that I have in front of me now, if I pump in an HDR feed, all my highlights are blown out, the blacks all get crushed. But then when I look at my main monitor, I can see all the detail in those. Aside from the example that Alex just gave, it'll be hard for you to ask like a YouTube or a Netflix or Apple, because as soon as your device makes a request for a file, the system knows that you're on a phone or a device that can play HDR, so it'll direct you to a server and give you that file. Right? So for you to see the difference locally, you'll have to generate that file and then see it through those two monitors. That's like the hard part. Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I just checked this now on YouTube. If you do a search, like I just typed in demonstration, and if you go into filters, you can filter to just see HDR content. So that might be a good tool for you to be able to look at HDR material on YouTube. I need an HDR monitor now.
It's an expensive process.
I don't know if it's relevant, but Tom Weiland just popped into the chat with Monoprices having a sale, President's Day sale, up to 70% off. So that may or may not be relevant just for today.
Okay. Anyway, yeah. So the good news is that you can get there's a lot of HDR monitors out there now that are Dolby Vision compatible. That's one thing I will say about monitors is that don't buy anything that's not Dolby Vision. Like it's the future of, you don't want, you'll be bummed because of Apple. I think they've won the race. So, Apple no one's going to know what HDR is that isn't Dolby Vision in a year because of Apple's PR. So before that, it was kind of a horse race. It's not anymore. So just make sure if you're buying a monitor, you're not buying something that we would consider legacy. They're probably going to fall away. Anyway, thank you all. It's a great panel today. Like great panel, like from I think it was four continents. We had 4 continents very well represented with great technical we had great technical from Germany and the Philippines and Australia and the UK and the United States. I'm always amazed. Like we really, I don't know. I'm really thinking about this whole thing that Grant was talking about was that you just can't do this anywhere else. Like you couldn't have the meeting that we're having anywhere else in the world in any other format. You couldn't put us all in the same room because it'd be too cost prohibitive. You have a interesting conversation between everyone in a way that makes sense. I mean, we can't get this brain trust together any other way. So anyway, I just appreciate everybody who came and asked great questions. Appreciate the panelists for incredible feedback. It's just amazing. Really, really well done. It's a great way to start the week. And we'll jump in. A reminder, doing it again tonight. So if you didn't get your question answered, or if you think about another one, or you were sleeping, we're going to do it again tonight, 6 o'clock. Just to make sure to manage everybody's expectations. It's really 6:30 that we start. 6 to 6:30 is like 6:30 to 7 here in the mornings. So 6 to 6:30, people will come in. We'll do mic checks at 6, 6:12, and then work our way into this is Pacific Standard Time, but we'll do mic checks and then start right at the very bottom of the hour. So if you want to be in the panel, please come in by 6:10. And and the reason we're not starting earlier than that is that there's another show by one of our members that ends at 6 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, and I don't want to. That's the tech show. What's the I don't have it written out in front of me.
AV Tech
Talk.
The AV Tech Talks, which there's a link in. So AV Tech Talks is there should be links. Ed Willick, and there should be links in Discord to go to that. I would highly recommend it if you've got the time. It starts at I think 4 o'clock, 3 or 4 o'clock at Pacific Standard Time, 7 to 9 on Monday nights, and so we just don't want to step on that because it's a great show on its own. So that's why we start at 9 o'clock Eastern or 6
and
o'clock
we're getting
Pacific.
big panels for the evening show. Sometimes there are more people there than there
evening
are.
show's rocking. I could run if I had more time, if I've already gone a lot, if I had more time, we could run that for 4 or 5 hours. It's a pretty great
and you'll meet new people.
Yeah, exactly. All right. See everybody in the post show or whoever's continuing on. See, otherwise.